December 18, 1997, the 60th floor, John Hancock Center Tower, downtown Chicago. This is not a theater stage, this is a crime scene. A case without a knife-wielding killer, yet riddled with the fingerprints of a ruthless power system. Chris Farley was found collapsed on the cold floor of his luxurious multi-million-dollar apartment. His massive body lay on its side. He was wearing only pajama bottoms. His hand tightly clutched a rosary. Blood oozed from his nose, frozen in the cold of the Chicago winter. Autopsy report number 97-101, released by the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office, announced a cause of death so familiar to artists that it was almost boring: mixed drug toxicity, a lethal speedball dose. Let's pause at the term speedball. Medically, this is a deadly combination of cocaine and morphine. Cocaine is an extremely powerful stimulant. It forces the heart to beat wildly, pushes blood pressure to the maximum, and commands the body to operate at hundreds of % capacity. Meanwhile, morphine is a central nervous system depressant. It slows down breathing and lulls the internal organs to sleep. When these two substances run through the bloodstream simultaneously, they create a fierce physiological tug-of-war. The heart screams for oxygen to maintain its frantic beating, but the lungs are anesthetized and refuse to respire. A body torn apart from the inside. But that is only the surface of the death certificate. That paper also recorded another medical detail, one that exposes the crime of an entire industry: severe coronary atherosclerosis. Coronary atherosclerosis, simply put, the blood vessels surrounding and nourishing his heart had been suffocated by fatty plaques. Some segments of the blood vessels were so narrow they were almost completely closed off, a worn-out, distorted heart struggling to carry a body mass of nearly 180 kilograms. It had been exhausted long before the final injection of drugs could deliver the finishing blow. That year, Chris had just turned 33. A 33-year-old body carrying the heart of a dying 70-year-old man is not a biological accident. It is the physical footprint of a deliberate erosion process. American audiences burst into tears in front of their televisions. Entertainment media splashed headlines about a personal tragedy. They called him a funny fat guy who lost himself to addiction and depression. They blamed the demons in his mind. That was a perfect lie, a brilliant information blockade strategy by the entertainment capitalists. Medical records do not lie. The accumulated injuries in his joints, the fatty liver, and Chris's ruined heart are evidence of a product life cycle exploited to the very end. They did not kill Chris Farley with bullets or poison. The Hollywood machine killed him by turning his self-destruction into an invaluable commodity. They priced his smile by his face-planting falls onto glass floors. They paid for the humiliation. And when that money-printing machine showed signs of short-circuiting, instead of taking it in for repairs, they chose to squeeze out its maximum capacity until the engine completely caught fire. His death, from the financial perspective of the corporations, was simply the inevitable depreciation of an asset that had lost all its utility value. Flipping back through the files of the early 90s, NBC Network, the legendary Studio 8H, the iconic television show Saturday Night Live, SNL, under the shaping hands of boss Lorne Michaels, was in need of a fresh breeze to maintain its rating throne, and they found a gold mine. A young man from Wisconsin, hailing from the Second City improvisational comedy troupe, Chris Farley carried within him a raw, overflowing energy, and most importantly, he was willing to do anything to be loved. He was ready to throw his oversized body through walls, stumble repeatedly, smash his face into tables, and expose his excess fat under the blinding stage lights. In October 1990, the sketch named Chippendales aired on national television. This was considered the defining moment of Chris's career, but in reality, it was his first contract selling his soul. The script's content was incredibly simple. Two contestants were auditioning for the role of male strippers. One was Patrick Swayze, an actor possessing a flawless physique, the ultimate sex symbol of America at the time. The other was Chris Farley. Chris was shirtless. His fatty mass jiggled violently to the music. He danced frantically beside Swayze's chiseled muscles. The network's purpose was very clear, cruel, and direct. Throw an obese guy onto the stage to serve as a scapegoat. They used his absurdity, oversized body, and self-degradation to generate laughter. The audience laughed hysterically. Ratings skyrocketed to unimaginable numbers. The press cheered. Right at that moment, the alliance of film studios and television networks found the pricing formula for Chris Farley. They realized that they did not need to buy his refined acting talent or psychological depth. They bought humiliation. Body shaming became the most effective money-printing machine. The systematic financial exploitation officially began. From the small screen, the industrial machine pushed him onto the big screen. In 1995, Paramount Pictures' movie project Tommy Boy premiered. The production budget was squeezed to a minimum, under 20 million USD, but the box office revenue quickly surpassed the 32 million USD mark, followed by tens of millions of dollars in net profit from the VHS market and cable television rights. The ROI, Return on Investment Index, of this project skyrocketed. This dry financial term can be translated into everyday language. The power system spent a mere penny to hire Chris to slam his body into car windows, tumble down mud hills, and they reaped dozens of dollars from the endless satisfaction of the crowd. A profit margin drained directly from the blood, sweat, and crumbling cartilage tissues of the actor. In 1996, Black Sheep hit theaters. In early 1997 came Beverly Hills Ninja. Chris stepped into the club of the most powerful A-list actors in the film capital. His fee hit the threshold of 6 million USD for a single role. He used that money to buy a luxury apartment atop the John Hancock Tower in Chicago. Executives hugged and kissed him at lavish cocktail parties. Prestigious magazines called him the physical comedy genius of a new generation, the heir to John Belushi's legacy. Everything was woven, edited, and painted to look like a perfect American dream, an oversized, insecure boy who had risen to become a global superstar through relentless effort. But beneath those record-breaking revenue numbers and thunderous applause, a silent death sentence had been signed and sealed by the system. Those sitting at the top of the Hollywood food chain knew full well he was collapsing. They saw him panting, pale-faced and needing an oxygen tank after every tumbling scene. But this machine did not need a healthy, slimmed-down, and sober Chris Farley. It needed a crazy fat guy, always in an agitated state and ready to explode on screen. The illusion was successfully erected. The dazzling aura obscured the fatal cracks, and the prey, with a bleeding heart and ruined body, officially stepped deeper into the slaughterhouse. Let's carefully analyze the schedule chart of a physical comedian in the 90s. Unlike stand-up comedians who only need to stand behind a microphone, Chris Farley's job consisted of throwing himself through glass tables, of smashing his face into wooden walls, of tumbling headlong downstairs onto a rock-solid concrete floor. With a body weighing approximately 180 kilograms, each fall was no longer acting. It was a mechanical injury, smashed knee joints, rapidly degenerating spinal cartilage, chronic pain rooted deeply into every muscle fiber. To continue stepping onto the set, he needed high doses of painkillers. To stay awake all night writing scripts and sprinting at the SNL office, he needed synthetic drugs. And to be able to close his eyes and sleep after hours of extreme neurological stimulation under the stage lights, he needed heroin and liters of hard liquor. This was not the depraved partying habit of a young star. In medical terms, it was a process of chemical self-medication. Simply put, when the healthcare system is ignored, the victim is forced to borrow poison to coerce the body into ignoring physical pain and mental collapse. He pumped drugs into his veins to keep his biological machine running according to the strict terms of his labor contracts. Archival medical records confirm that Chris Farley went in and out of rehab centers a total of 17 times, 17 interrupted treatment sessions. How did the industrial machine react to this alarming medical figure? They did not allow him to stop. Instead, cinematic magnates devised a perfect risk management solution. They spent money to hire handlers or sober companions to follow him everywhere, at all times. Through the lens of the media, this move seemed deeply humanitarian. But let's peel back the financial nature of this investment. The cost of these supervisors was absolutely not aimed at healing Chris. It was purely a production insurance cost. Ruthlessly speaking, it was the money they spent to ensure the labor tool did not break down abruptly before the project wrapped. The sole mission of the supervision team was to force him to be sober enough to step out of his trailer, walk in front of the camera, smoothly complete the tumbling scene, and not be allowed to die during filming. In the summer of 1997, on the set of Almost Heroes, starring alongside Matthew Perry, Chris's internal organ condition had shifted to a red alert level. He continuously fainted, interrupting filming due to unstable heart rates and declining liver function. The Hollywood ruling class never signed an order to suspend the project to put their star into a hospital for long-term emergency care. They calculatedly ignored all the fading vital signs. They stuffed him into lightning-fast rehab stints lasting mere days, forced him to use rapid detox drugs, and then immediately dragged him back to the suffocating movie set. Tens of millions of dollars had been poured in. The summer release schedule had been locked in with cinema chains. In the mindset of the corporate machine, a highly valued asset is never allowed to stop generating profit, even when it is bleeding and rotting from the inside. October 25, 1997. Less than 2 months before his corpse was taken to the morgue, Chris Farley returned to the SNL stage as an honorary guest. Anyone with basic medical knowledge, or just a normal pair of eyes, could see that what was in front of them was no longer a comedian. It was a dying biological entity. His voice was extremely hoarse. His breathing was broken, heavy like the sound of sawing wood. Sweat poured out like he was bathing, even though he was just standing still. He continuously forgot his lines, disoriented right on live television. Yet in the opening scene, the production team still heartlessly had him act out an old joke, being choked by boss Lorne Michaels. It looked like a familiar comedy bit, but in reality, it was a perfect, direct, and chilling metaphor for this toxic relationship. The power system saw a man with an enlarged heart, a vascular system about to burst, collapsed lungs, and their decision remained: keep broadcasting. The viewership ratings for that episode were still sky high. The audience still roared with laughter in the stands. At the same time, in a closed recording studio, Chris was doing voiceover work for the main character in DreamWorks' blockbuster animated movie project, Shrek. He had completed about 85 to 90% of the workload. The audio drafts remaining in the studio's archives reveal a completely different version of Shrek. There was no gruff, fake Scottish growling voice. Through Chris's original voice, Shrek appeared as an obese, lonely young man, extremely insecure about his hideous appearance, and constantly yearning for societal acceptance. Chris wasn't acting at all. He was reading aloud the psychological report of his own life. But that desperate sincerity was not a life preserver. In early December 1997, Chris wandered through notorious drug parties in Chicago. His bank account held tens of millions of dollars. But the medical support network actually protecting his life was virtually zero. When the movies wrapped, the supervision machine was immediately withdrawn. Drug dealers and prostitutes freely entered and exited his high-end apartment as if it were a no-man's land. A stripper was with him in his final hours. Police testimonies recorded that she left when she saw him collapse, ignoring his fading breaths on the floor. She snatched a photo, gathered her belongings, and stepped over the massive, convulsing body. Do not just condemn an anonymous prostitute. She was merely the final, cheapest link in an exploitative supply chain that had spanned half a decade. On the morning of December 18th, when news of his death exploded on every front page, the public relations, PR, machine of the Studio Alliance immediately activated a global whitewashing campaign. The executives who once forced him to work to exhaustion now donned black suits, standing before the cameras playing the roles of soulmates. They issued a barrage of press releases praising his innate talent. Through the art of verbal manipulation, they cleverly redirected the entire media spearhead. They turned a systemic fatal labor exploitation into an accident of a misguided lifestyle. The cover-up was a resounding success. They scrubbed the bloodstains clean from their hands, while simultaneously burying the most core, rotten truth, that Chris Farley's obesity and addiction were never barriers stopping him from working. On the contrary, they were the very privileged raw materials, the toxic fuel that the industrial machine nurtured, tolerated, and drained to keep their money-printing machine at maximum capacity until the day the debtor's heart shattered. August 2005. 8 years after the day, Chris Farley's body was removed from his apartment in Chicago. The Hollywood Walk of Fame held a solemn ceremony. A brass star bearing his name was permanently embedded into the sidewalk. Network executives and film producers who had once drained his energy now stood there in expensive suits. They read pre-written speeches. They called him a brilliant but brief shooting star, a comedic genius with a kind heart. The audience applauded. Cameras flashed continuously. It was a flawless public relations play. That brass star was not a tribute. It was a screen, erected to cover up a legalized scene of exploitation. The entertainment capitalists clearly understood a fundamental principle of this industry: biological depreciation. A flesh and blood actor can fall ill, age, become dissatisfied, or demand a raise. But once he dies, he transforms into the most perfect form of asset, eternal intellectual property. No more addictions needing cover-ups, no more rehab stints slowing down filming progress or heart attacks threatening release schedules. The real-life version of Chris Farley was discarded, making way for a digital Chris Farley, obedient, undemanding, and continuously profitable. Nearly 3 decades after his death, the industrial machine continues to spin. The broadcasting rights for Tommy Boy, or Black Sheep, continually change hands between streaming platforms, bringing in massive streams of royalty revenue. Millions of views of the Chippendales sketch on YouTube every year still steadily pour advertising dollars into the pockets of media conglomerates. They continue to make money from his bodily falls, from his fatty physique, from the panting breaths of a deceased organism. Fundamentally speaking, in financial terms, this is a strategy of posthumous monetization. Understood nakedly, they are still selling tickets for the crowd to come and see the praised corpse, continuing to drain surplus value even when the coffin lid has long been nailed shut. Pop culture history has been systematically switched out. The media machine teaches us to remember Chris as a lovable fat guy who brought laughter, someone harboring the seeds of natural destruction in his mind. But if you are sober enough to peel away that outer shell, try turning on his final video recordings again. Look into his bloodshot eyes. Look at the cold sweat pouring out uncontrollably. Look at how his giant shoulders sagged after every physically exhausting antic. What you are watching is absolutely not the art of acting. You are witnessing a medical documentary, recording the real-time collapse of a cardiovascular system. You are watching a slow execution, dubbed with fake laughter, and sold to the market under the label family comedy. Chris Farley did not die because he was weak to the temptations of drugs or the pressure of fame. Drugs were just the lubricant so the human machine wouldn't break down midway. The only cold, sharp truth here is, he was crushed because his self-destruction was exactly the product sketch the market demanded. The power system had found an insecure young man, desperately yearning for societal acceptance, and they priced that acceptance with his very own life. They paid him to suffocate his own heartbeat on screen, every fall, every panting breath, every humiliated smile. That is not art. That was a cold-blooded transaction, covered up by velvet-wrapped contracts, and ended with an inanimate name lying beneath the heels of millions of passers-by.